Earth is not my planet of origin, and many of us may come from other spaces. You rise up and you get funneled up. As I get higher, the feelings of loneliness start to kind of leave. Then I get to a space that is essentially bright, that you just know doesn't end. It's very peaceful. Then we zoom out of there and we start descending down on this all orange planet that honestly looks like an orange marble of different shades. And as I'm getting closer and closer, all of these realizations start coming into me like, wow, this is where I'm from. This is why orange is my favorite color. Like this is my phone base. We're at fourth density, getting ready to cross into fifth density. So we're close to spiritual graduation as a social memory complex.
I want to know how your spiritual journey, how that all started for you.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say from maybe transitioning more from religious to spiritual was me having a health issue, and on the process of kind of that health issue of seeking help that was outside of traditional medicine, that was when I kind of really got on my kind of a spiritual path. And when I started like learning about um, meditation and fasting, and I ended up going on a 24-day water fast. And during that fast, not necessarily maybe focusing on God on the outer, but who am I within, and kind of switching that question. And I would say it was really during that process of fasting and during that health issue of healing, feeling a health ailment was my process of switching from more religious to spiritual. And I completed a 24-day water fast, which I then was able to go about and heal myself.
Wow. Okay. So, what kind of initiated you into the 24-day water fast? I know that you said that it's an illness. Like, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that was and why it was important for you? How did you even come about the 24-day water fast? Why did you choose that? Because there are just like so many options out there, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to share. So like myself and like so many of us, so many folks have or do have, I was able to heal myself is herpes. And I'm not talking about like the one, but the two, the one that you extremely difficult to get rid of. And it was really during there where doctors had said that soldiers used have to be on medicine, on pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. So it was for me during that process of uh, trying to heal myself, right? And then I ended up coming across a book called The Law of One, which really huge in my spiritual development. But essentially, there they talk about how every experience is connected to a particular lesson. And if you would like for that kind of experience to be progressed through, then you just need to figure out what is the lesson. So for then it became a research question of understanding why it was that I had that. And there's different ways that you can go about doing that. Of course, you can meditate. And they also talked about intentional fasting. And fasting, when you fast, the body starts to consume itself. And the first thing to be consumed are those things that are not needed. And then with intentionality, you can direct that consumption to certain things, certain thought forms, or certain ideas to make room for more higher vibrational things. So it was doing those things about learning about fasting, intentional fasting, and I worked my way up to a 24-day fast. So I did like a 3-day fast at first, a 5-day, then I bumped it up to a 10, and I did the 24, and I was all prepared to go to 40 days if needed be, because I was convinced that I was going to do whatever was needed to be
Yeah.
able to heal myself. But it was during that fast that I took me back to me being sexually molested by older women when I was a child, which I
Mm.
realized that it was being introduced to a high vibration, like sexual intercourse in a lower vibration, which manifested itself in me to then be able to have that. So during that process of healing and understanding that, I forgave those women for what they did to me as a child. I forgave myself for things that I did under that lower vibrational mindset, and it was the course of those things during the fast that really kind of I was able to understand these things, and it was in our process of forgiveness and understanding the lesson that was tied to it, and that's when I retested after the fast. That's when I was like, okay, I found that I healed myself, and um, was one of the happiest days of my life.
That's amazing. Wow. What would you say like well, first of all, let's get into that 24-day fast. How? Like it's intense cuz I did a 3-day fast and I think I know it's hard generally speaking, but I think for me personally, the hardest part about it was my brain telling me that I need to eat, right? My body was okay. I didn't feel like I was starving. As a matter of fact, my energy wasn't even that bad, but it was my brain consistently telling me it's time to eat. You need to
Hmm.
eat. You know what I mean? So that was the hardest part was getting over the things that my brain was telling me that I need to do. And when my
Hmm.
brain would tell me that, then my belly would grumble, right? Then my body's like, yeah, you need to eat. So now I'm just like in this cycle of talking my brain down, like, chill out, we're fine. Okay. And then after that, I'm okay. I carry on with my day, everything goes well. But 24 days, oh my goodness, how? Tell me like what that was like and how that helped you. Like, I want to know more about that point when you really began to shift in your perception with your body and like you just reconnecting to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So for one, I mean, as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that we realize when we're fasting how much creatures of habit that we are.
Yeah.
Um, it is difficult. And then, at the time, I was a vice president in the Minnesota system in regards to working in higher education. So I mean, there was lunches like all the time, breakfast is all the time, right? So colleagues are, and these are still things that there's programs and things where there's always food, So I'm being
Yeah.
invited to these things sometimes to speak, sometimes to be a part of it, and people are going up getting their food, and everybody's asking like, you know, you're not eating, no. Why fasting? Well, you're not Muslim. Is it Ramadan? Like, no, I'm just. So it would be these consistent things all the time in regards to work. So work was difficult because I had a pretty high administrative position where our position required a lot of meetings and relationships and lunches and dinners, and then a lot of times it just be like just not eating. So that part was difficult. But my team and my administrative assistant, they knew about my consistent fasting, so she did a really really good job of really shielding my schedule to just be like, Dr. Locust isn't taking like he'll meet with you during lunch, but y'all not gonna be eating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really what that would be. And then even at home, at that time, I was married. We married with one child, and but they continued to eat. So you're smelling food, which still smells good.
Yeah.
It's still the favorite meals, and then you also just realize how many food commercials there are. So it's these things that you just normally don't pick up on that you start to pick up on.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would say like during that time, the everything was really all about understanding and healing during that fast. So I was very motivated, but also like during that time, I I would say that I experienced a sense of connection to to all things that I hadn't necessarily had felt before.
Mm.
And like I would like there was a, and I'm not talking about like like going and like hugging trees or none of that stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was in regards to there was a sense of knowing. And you asked about like the because I kind of think about it was kind of a process of me knowing because I still was like working out and active, so I actually ended up getting down to like my high school weight. I was maybe like 100, maybe like 185 pounds now, but I was like 150 pounds. So I lost a lot of weight. So a lot of people are like, I mean, I was healthy, but because I was also vegan at that time. I was fasting. I was just drinking alkaline water. So it was like a full system reflush. So one thing you start to really see how many things we eat that are not healthy. So you start to see that flush come out. But then and then there's things where you start to see like every action I do can be intentionally for something. So even when I worked out and I would maybe run 4 to 8 miles, I would say in my mind each step is a step towards me healing and finding myself. And
Mm.
that would be the intention of my run to say this is going to be a step closer to me getting rid of this because me and my wife we want to have another child, which we do now. She's 4 years old, and we're going to be looking for dresses for our daddy daughter dance. But it
Amazing.
was it was those things that then even when I would go on these runs, I would notice at certain times, and it happens now to where it would be a time to I may be on like mile 3 or 4 and I'm kind of out of breath and I'm starting to kind of get fatigued and there will be a bird that will fly like right next to me and then just maybe go up just a little bit right in the direction of what I'm running or it will be these signs from nature that were clear to me that we're here with you keep going and then I would say okay during this run my breaths are also going to be some for my healing, but also I'm going to dedicate it to the plant life around this run. So it
Yeah.
became like a connection to where I started to see things and understand, and even with certain people. Um, and I will say another part was this would be the last kind of part to that question because again, it happened in these stages. There was, when you're in a lot of times in these roles, you get grievances or lawsuits. So while I was there, I ended up getting sued by one of the unions, and essentially, kind of the basis was that I was there to basically get more diversity, get more folks, uh, represented folks in my department, and
Mm.
essentially, when I ended up doing that, some of the unions one of the unions, not some of, but one of the unions did not like I wasn't that hiring their members because they didn't have diversity, so they sued me for discrimination.
Oh, wow.
So that was the basis of the lawsuit. So I want to make sure, like as I say, I'm being sued. It wasn't that nothing crazy. Well, it was crazy, but nothing on that other thing. So as I'm going through this experience, that maybe lasted for about a year and a half, and the institution was very supportive. So I want to make sure I say that because they knew it didn't make sense. Like when people find it, just like this doesn't make any sense. But there's a process that you have to go through,
Right, right.
regardless of that. And it would and it got to the well, I'm not gonna even go with what to the person said, but I'm in this meeting and I'm across from these folks who are literally saying things that is documented on record that is just not true. It's just
Mm.
completely false. And fortunately, during the interview process, this person met with a lot of different people on my team, but they were in the meetings that I was in. And I used to do Title IX work, like in Ohio. So I've kind of known not to put myself in situations where anything can be frivolously made up. So fortunately,
Yeah.
there were multiple people who were there that witnessed what was said and how she made kind of discriminatory remarks and things like that. So I'm sitting in this meeting and it wasn't her, but it's their team that's representing her. They're just lying and making up stuff. And I feel myself like getting so angry and frustrated because it's just not true. And I had read that morning in the Law of One that it's about finding the love in the moment. And if you
Mhm.
cannot find the love in the moment, then that's an opportunity to then give love. So I'm thinking about that as they're lying, and I'm just like, I don't really see any love in the moment. I'm in here. This is all wrong. It's all made, and I just start thinking all these things that I'm going through that I think is complete BS. But then I think about, well, then you should give love, and my first reaction is, man, I don't want to be giving them love. Like they're lying on me. And I'm like, well, that's a lower vibrational way of thinking. So
Yeah,
then what I start doing, I start like visualizing me from my heart chakra sending them love, like right in the middle of the meeting. And I just felt my anger just really completely dissipate, to the where I started to see things from their perspective. Even though I didn't agree with it, I started to see that, for example, well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I just saw things from their perspective that I didn't necessarily see before. And I would say in that moment, that me finding that love in the moment and giving love in that time, I would say 2 years later, worked out to me presenting at their national conference on diversity.
that's crazy.
So,
Wow.
so that was, it was a process thing, but those were kind of some specific kind of realizations of connectedness during that time that I didn't necessarily have prior to that.
Wow, that's powerful. How do you find when you learn these things and then you're able to apply it? Because the thing is about spirituality and a lot of these spiritual concepts, we tend to read about it and we have it here in our heads, and we don't really practice it, or we don't really begin to embody it. Sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes, for example, you might see someone who, or know someone who, they might, say a lot of the spiritual lingo and all the things, and they have all the information. They've read all the books, they've listened to all the podcasts or shows or whatever. But then the way that they present themselves, the way that they live their lives, the way that they respond to situations that they come across, it just doesn't align. And of course, like, we get it. Like, me too, as well. Like, there are times when you kind of, like, you react to something without thinking, or you just react based on emotion, right? All these things come with
Mhm.
practice. But I mean, like, just generally every day, how do you carry on? How do you, I guess, move through your day? How do you interact with people? Are you checking your perception? Are you checking the way that you think? Um, are you recognizing how you truly feel about things and situations, and really assessing where that is coming from? So all these things. So a lot of times we digest a lot of spiritual stuff, but we really don't embody that. And I think that's where a lot of us struggle with, because then when we're given a situation where we're supposed to put these things into practice, it becomes like a hot mess. So, and I know, like, exactly, in a situation like when you're literally getting sued and you're like, this is complete BS. Like, what the hell? It's hard. It's really hard. But I think that's the whole point of it. The whole point is for you to be able to embody all of
Mhm.
that and bring forth the love even in the hardest moments. And I think that's when you can tell, that's when you can begin to really see your growth. Right. So I'd love to know, like, how you've been able to kind of, I guess, embody this, generally speaking, into your daily life, and even into going, like, going into the work that you're doing with your business, how that
Mhm.
looks like for you.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, it well, even at its core, I'll even back up a little bit, because I know we're talking about like spirituality, but even at its core, my background. My PhD is in research, so I'm actually an experiential researcher. So I believe it's important to not only learn about stuff, but to actually participate and to actually do it.
Yeah.
And these would be things, I think that we a lot of times what people happen either they don't embody it, or they're just trying, so kind of they try some things, and they don't really kind of let things stick. And I think
Mm.
for me, once I was able to understand the impact of consistency, right? Because, and it's not to say that we're going to be perfect all the time, because I think spirituality is also about giving ourselves grace. I think
Exactly.
that's first and foremost. We got to make sure we give ourselves grace, but accountability is also a spiritual practice, right? And
Yes.
we also have to be consistent. And for me, when I'm able to see changes in myself of being able to say, like, and just it's small these small tweaks to be able to say, you know, if there's a task or something that you don't necessarily maybe like, is there can you find something that's gratifying about it, or gratifying in the task? So one of the things that I do not like doing, is washing dishes or doing anything of preparation of dishes, because it gets my hands ashy. Then I got to put on more lotion. It just, I don't like doing it. But and it would be something that my wife don't also doesn't like doing. So, but what I said was, it's a blessing to have food. It's a blessing to have silverware, and it's a blessing to have a family to be able to eat with. And
Yeah.
all of these dishes in here represents this. So as I'm washing dishes, I'm not looking at it as a meaningful, kind of a meaningless act that I could be doing something else that is maybe more productive. But I'm taking gratitude in the moment, because we just had a nice meal with our family. We're fortunate to have a consistent hot meal that we can eat, and that's a blessing. And I think it's those times where those changing of perception that we can do, that can really be able to change the trajectory of your entire process, your entire mood, and how you interact with people. And those things are free. So it's, for me, it's always about how can we be able to make those small adjustments that can then have huge impact. Another thing I would say, even for even that embodiment, for me, it's been able to know that the universe will give you what you put in, you get out, and I believe it's even more. So
Yeah.
even everybody I meet with throughout the day, I just send them love and light. I send them positive energy. And what I have found is, when I end up meeting with those folks, I have wonderful meetings with people. Now, and I'm not saying that it's because of me sending all of this love and light. I think I'm a great person. I think I meet with great people, but I believe there's an impact to that, of
Right.
sending and intentionally wishing somebody blessings and good tidings and goodwill. So that energy then goes somewhere. So for me, it's been that embodiment has came at not trying to say, I'm going to do 6 months and do this grand big thing. You can do that, but it starts with those small steps. I didn't first
Mm.
up and say I'm about to do a 24-day water fast. No, I started with 3 days. I worked my way up to 5. I did 7, and then I just worked my way up. So I think a lot of times when it comes to embodying, we also have to uh, kind of be realistic. And another thing I'll say to that, which, because this is something that I have had to make adjustments for, and we had did a session yesterday with our ConsciRise series, making time for inner work, where one of our practitioners had kind of what happiness is an equation of what actual happens minus expectations, what your expectations are. And what I realized, that a lot of times there will be situations where I would look at kind of what other people were doing, and taking that as motivation, and setting that as expectation,
Mm.
which is the exact wrong thing to do. I can use those points as motivation, which is what I should be doing, but setting those somebody else's story as my expectations, it's just unrealistic. It doesn't make sense. And so a lot of things that I know I've had to do, which I think when you're doing these more spiritual practices, you start to realize these things and you make these adjustments to say, you know, someone's motivation does not, they can be my motivations, but they should not be my expectations. And then making those again small adjustments, but again, that comes with practice and realization, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's a natural thing to do because our brains, we tend to compare and contrast all the time. And so you want to match that energy when you see someone really doing so amazing at something that you aspire to do equally. Naturally, you kind of want to match that energy and match the outcome. And it's just not like that, right? It's just not like that. We all have our own special abilities and capacities for things, and that's okay. And you absolutely could match that energy, and it just looks a little bit different for you, right? Because we're all unique individuals. So someone else's success or whatever it is that you're doing and you're doing so well at it, you could equally do that. But of course, it might look different for you simply because you're you. And what you do is special and unique to what it's supposed to be like for you. So that is that's a very important point that you made there. One other thing that I wanted to dive into with you the last time we spoke about your past life regressions, and I want to get into how that was and what you discovered about yourself. First of all, what did you even learn? What did you see?
Yeah. So during there were two specific sessions, the two separate sessions. The first one was a past life regression. If you're not, and this with terminology would be a little bit different from Dolores Cannon QHHT, but this comes from Michael Newton's work, the Newton Institute, and Journey of Souls. So past life regression is essentially going under hypnosis, where you experience memories from a past life. I did that, and then there's something called a life between lives session, and
Hmm.
that is when you basically experience essentially per the book the preparation period, the in between times before you reincarnate into a life and a body. So a lot of times in that experience, people meet their spiritual guidance system and folks that are in particular incarnations with them. So to condense down about 7.5, 8 hours of hypnosis. Um, I would say
Sounds
in my
intense.
so I'll do them separately.
All right.
So in my past life regression, the first thing I learned was that I was a corn farmer.
Hmm.
And I was a corn farmer who was very lonely. I didn't have any family. I didn't have any family. I didn't have any friends, and it was an extremely lonely life. And
Mm.
um, and kind of realizing now that was one of the lessons that I was supposed to learn, because not only did I realize, which I'll talk about in the next one, that um, Earth is not my planet of origin, and many of us may come from other spaces. And I found I was able to find out that that was one of the lessons, because that hadn't necessarily been a part of my spiritual experience on my planet of origin. So that was one of my lessons. I also learned that my ex fiance in this life was an ex girlfriend in that life, like my only relationship in that life, which there were lessons that I did not learn in that life, which repeated in this life. And then I would say the probably the most beautiful thing is, well, I don't want to say beautiful yet, but I died in around my 80s. I didn't even have a funeral. I died completely lonely and
Oh,
very sad. And I was, it was very emotional at the time, because you know when you're under hypnosis, you are experiencing the emotions at the time. So even
yeah.
as I laid there in my cornfield, like damn, like I don't even got a funeral. Like that's how I died, like
No.
knowing that. So um, as I was funneling up, because basically you rise up and you get funneled up. As I was looking down at my body, that's when I actually realized I was white, uh, which was hilarious because I was like, because I didn't look at a mirror, you know what I'm saying? I like I looked at a mirror when I was under hypnosis. so, so that was interesting. And then to add a layer to that, at the time I was a chief diversity officer in the Minnesota system. So there was a lot of things that there was a lot of insights that I received during that time. But
Yeah.
I'm channeled up, and but I'm still feeling as I get higher, the feelings of loneliness start to kind of leave, but I'm still feeling it. And I get to a space that is essentially like bright, that you just know doesn't end. It's very peaceful. And I
Yeah.
see a half circle of about 8 different circles in light. And one of them was my sister, who I was just with this past weekend, my older sister, and the other one was one of my mentors, who actually the first person who told me about a past life regression. He's a white Irish guy in this life, and talked about being an African slave in a previous life. And I didn't even know when he told me that, I didn't even know what he was talking about and where this was even real, but he was the one who introduced me to it. So I
Yeah.
was there, and I'm still feeling this loneliness, and they basically surround me and put all of this love and light around,
Mm.
and just I just not only felt so safe, but it just almost was thinking, and they refer to it in Journey of Souls as almost like a spiritual light bath, as to where it's like a washing off of those vibrations that are more third density or physical vibrations, I would say. And then
Yeah.
after I left there, there was a male spiritual figure standing behind me that I got the sense that was more indigenous. It took me to a place that basically, if you can think about the planets, the planet Saturn, but the rings are straight. We were meditating out like on the rings, and then I was absorbed inside, and that, whether it was source, creator, God, a portion of it, I was inside of it, and essentially every everything that I saw in that previous life that was an area of separation, I was able to see as an area of opportunity. So, for example,
Mm.
um, I focused on so much of not having a physical person to talk to
Yeah.
in that life, but I was able to see when in there that that was just an opportunity to have a greater relationship with plants and the the seeds I was planting, and to be more involved with that process, the relationship thing. So it was like almost like a board of all these different experiences of separation. It just went like boom, 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 and it was just insight after insight. And it wasn't like condemning, like, oh, you messed up. It was just like, oh, I didn't see it that way, and it was just like, wow, like this, wow, wow, like, man. But as it went through there, it was erasing or maybe balancing out like shame or just lower vibrations. And then
Yeah.
I was basically removed from there, and I was like completely refreshed, renewed, and the figure that was behind me was like, we're going to bring you out now. And the beings who were at the kind of, they were this direction, they didn't have hands, but they were waving by. So it had to be telepathic communication saying that we'll see you again. And
Yeah.
then as soon as they said that, that's when the person who did it was like, okay, we're going to bring you out now. And that was the
Wow.
first experience.
That's a beautiful experience. That is so amazing. Okay. What I'm really curious about, you said something earlier. You were making connections between that life and the work that you were currently doing at a time when you had that regression. What were the connections there?
Yeah, yeah. So, part of it, and this was I was leading the institution at the time in Minnesota, which you may be familiar with, like the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
All
when
of us.
yeah, and when that happened in Minnesota, so there were a few things happening. For one, it happened in Minnesota, and secondly, I was in the Minnesota system, but so the officers were trained in the Minnesota system, right? So there's a responsibility there. So there's a lot of like racial things that are happening, and then there's things on my campus that I'm dealing with even during COVID. Our Asian students are being attacked, and so there's a lot of things, a lot of race things that are happening to me to think that I guess that would have been the last thing I would have thought I would have been. Like coming
Yeah.
from that experience, like being especially just being as outgoing as I am. Like I love talking to people. I love being in different groups and connecting, and to be not only like a lonely corn farmer, lonely white corn farmer. I grew up in a city, so it was all these different things. But then here's another connection that I realized too. I would always, my friends would always ask me as I got like these advanced degrees that why am I always working in these rural areas? Like they would ask me like, man, why are you
Mm.
always working in these like? And I didn't have an answer because there was a great. I didn't have an answer for it. It was a great question, but I realized after that experience that because of my my death in a more rural area, there was a balancing that needed to occur. So for me to be able to find myself in spirituality in a rural environment to balance that energy from a previous life I was able to then move past that to then be able to, and I don't live in a rural area now and I'm comfortable, but it was a balancing of energies that had happened in there.
Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating. Wow. It's so crazy when you see how this thing works.
And it's a very sophisticated very sophisticated but
Extremely.
organized system to where and then the other one I'll say the other one was a life between live sessions. This was about maybe about 4.5 hours, and I learned that I was indigenous, and I was involved and this was in the U.S. the French and Indian Wars. So I was Iroquois, and this is me placing what happened along with what I know about historical facts. So that's why because it's not like like indigenous people are like, oh, this is 1858, like or whatever it is, right? So um,
Yeah, yeah,
so essentially, in that life, I realized I was an indigenous warrior, but was also one of the leaders of our tribe. And
yeah.
the French had kept encroaching on our land to the point to where we had to go to war. And there's a scene of us, um, man, of all of us, like thousands of us, just riding, and we didn't know they had guns. We didn't know what guns were, and in that single one, they may be killed like 80% of us,
Wow.
including women and including children. It was just I'm getting sad even thinking about it because um, that was my family, that was my people. Um,
Mm,
so essentially, after that battle. We were pretty much like wiped out, and there was a group of four of us that were kind of talking about like, what do we do after this? And I was kind of thinking like, there's already been so much loss of life, maybe we can move somewhere else. And then essentially the others were like, I was outvoted, and the thing was to be able to go where they are and kill as many of them as we can, like just to let them know that, just to go out strong. So that's
yeah.
what we did. And we went down there, we knew where they were, and I we just started killing them. And I can just remember um like turning this guy around and then stabbing him with my spear and looking this guy in the eye and just feeling so sad. I mean, just so sad that I'm not only killing him, but just sad. I mean, it wasn't like any happiness and glory in killing him. It was just this. complete sadness and of this death that again I was not used to from where I'm from. And um, one of my questions before that experience, because before these experiences, you come up with questions, and these questions then also kind of dictate your experience because it's what you want to know, especially if you're meditating and things like that. So one thing I wanted to know was who am I? Who is the essence of who I am? I had this at the time. I had already had my past life regression as the white corn farmer. I know I'm kind of this cool black dude in this life. So like, who is the essence of who I am?
Yeah.
And essentially we get captured and um, we're facing the woods, our hands are shackled and our ankles are shackled and we're on our knees, so we're like this, and the guys are next there's some guys next to me and I'm like making jokes, I'm like, everything's gonna be all right, I'm and like trying to find like levity in the moment. And then
Yeah.
as I'm looking at the woods, it pans out and they were holding rifles to the back of our heads. And they shoot him, and shoot me. And I end up um, shot in the head with kind of laying on the last guy. And I can just recall like and I was like physically crying during the experience. Like, so, as you're going, if you're feeling those emotions, but just was just kind of in awe of like, not only how I died, but it was also almost like shock. So I'm just like in tears, crying while there, and then kind of same time I get funneled up, but this time I was on like almost like a conveyor belt of light that then went into this more dome structure, and that was like my welcome back party. Because if you familiar with the Journey of Souls, they have welcome back parties, and there was maybe about a hundred light beings there that I can tell that I all knew,
Yeah.
and they're all like welcome back, but it's like I just got shot in the head. It's like that still is fresh. Like when I get there, like I just got shot in the head,
Yeah.
and I can recall, and this what was so I would say beautiful about the moment because it lets me know that as above, so below,
Oh
and I
yeah.
have like so there's somebody that's trying to tell me something like trying to tell me something like, hey, 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 and I'm just like, man, calm down. Like I just got shot in the head. And then somebody goes like, I see getting shot in the head didn't change your personality. Then everybody just
Oh.
starts laughing. Everybody
Oh
starts
my
laughing.
God.
And I belong to a historically black Greek fraternity. So it reminded me literally of how my friends and I, my fraternity brothers and I, my family and I like really joke on each other that could be a little harsh, but we would never let anybody else do it. Right. So it was just this point, and I'm just like, it's too soon, man. I just got like, and we're all laughing. We're all laughing, but it's actually kind of taking the pain. It's actually taking the pain out of like,
Oh.
everything that had happened. So as I'm there, um, um, the person actually was this a good time for you to be able to ask your questions now? So and is a guide there? And then what was interesting was even though it was a dome shape, if it was a square, my guide was in the right hand corner, and which really let me understand and know on another level, our guides are always present. You just
Yeah.
have to be able to, invite them over for them to be able to be of service. So basically, he comes over and I start asking my questions, which my questions were, am I from here? If I'm not from here, where am I from? What is my soul occupation? Soul occupation being what do I do when I'm not incarnate in a physical body? So I have like a list of 10 questions, those being some of them.
Mm.
And as I start to ask these kind of go through those questions, I start to then we zoom out of there and we start to like start descending down on this all orange planet that honestly looks like an orange marble of different shades. And
Wow.
as I'm getting closer and closer, all of these realizations start coming into me like, wow, this is where I'm from. This is why orange is my favorite color. Like this is my phone case. Uh, I really do. Orange is my favorite color, and all of
Yeah.
these things start coming to me. And once I get on the surface, um, I realized that not only this is my home planet, but as I start to move around and go different places, I start to like get more about what I do, the creatures that are there, which I can describe, the all the landscape there. But I go inside this dome, this dome that is made of light, and the ground is beautiful. It's like orange shades of marble, but it's moving. So I go into this dome
Wow.
of light that I thought was my house, kind of at first, and but it starts putting like this. It was almost like this energy on me, but it was like a beacon. And I learned that as this was happening, I learned that that for one, our planet, we're in. If you're familiar with the law of one, but we're in the social memory complex phase. We're at fourth density, getting ready to cross into fifth density. So we're close to spiritual graduation as a social memory complex. I also
Mm.
learned that my and I guess and I almost hate saying it because I know this is ego saying don't say it, but one of the things I got was like a part of that particular quadrant. I'm a kind of a minister of spiritual evolution. So what I do is if there's beings there that are trying to become closer and closer together, I then will go there and then blend my energy together, and then that then allows it to happen on a more kind of sacred level. But it's and it's and I but I used to be a mediator as when I was in high school and middle school. So it's interesting how these things start to then kind of
Yeah.
coalesce.
Yeah.
But then also realized that since I don't do a lot of that because there's a lot of the folks are not to do it on their own. So I'm also on the team. There's a team that will go out to look to see which planets can our social memory complex be of service to. And there's another team that devises a strategy and will then go and reincarnate them. And I realize I'm on that second team. And that's a part of why I'm here. And ConsciRise is also why I'm here. I was able to confirm that while being there. Um, and then just kind of some other just cool facts. Um, that was just like there's water here and oceans here. They're there, but it's the water. I guess it would be water. I don't know what it was, but it's all orange. And just like, but you can't drown. So even if you've seen the movie Moana, if you go too far, it just kind of brings you back like the water in Moana. I got a daughter, so I'm
Yeah.
always watching Moana. But it's just like that. So
Wow.
you can't drown. And then there's a part of it to where like this part, like for example, would be for if people are going to just like enjoy themselves, or if like kind of like we would go to our beach where we can go and just kind of enjoy the natural wonders. But then there's the other side that is for spiritual based things. And beings are able, if beings wanted to, let's say, become closer together or become more closer, they can go into that liquid or wherever it was. And by way of that intention, something happens and they become closer together. And this is not a
Wow.
sexual thing, but this is more of a thing of kind of combining consciousnesses. Um,
Yeah.
and so I found out like that piece is there, and I think it does something with half it creates maybe a oversoul or something. It was really, but I know that there's a spiritual side that is just for conscious growth, and another side that's more play. And then there was pets there, not pets because nobody owned them, but they would come out in like the when there was like daylight, and we would all play with them, and they would kind of be for everybody. But then at night they would go into their living quarters, and they so nobody owned anything, but they played with everybody. And then I would say the last thing was he asked, which wasn't one of my questions, was is there anybody here that is also from my planet? And I realized that my son is also from there. I realized that one of the first spiritual couples that I met, they're from there. And then I learned that the planet I'm from, it kind of like our moon goes around the Earth. There's another planet that's a fourth density, that's a green planet that goes around the planet I'm from. And that's where my daughter is from, and that's where her name Jade comes from. And it was my
Wow.
son it was my son that actually came up with the name for our daughter.
Wow. Wow. That's such an eye-opening experience. There's so many things that, it's corresponding from this life to that life to the next life. But that was also hilarious, though. That was hilarious. It's just it shows how much of our personality that we still have with us, even when we're in spirit, because they were
Yeah,
checking you right there. Like, dude, I see that didn't change you.
yeah, and it was funny, but it was just one of those things as to where like like this is beautiful, because
Yeah,
it's a reason why I enjoy these people and I enjoy this type of kind of get back at
it
each other.
makes
I really like
sense.
that stuff, and then it's like for it to happen there, and and there's and again there's other things that I can mention and talk about, but I want to like be cognizant of time and not but it was all these different realizations, and I would say kind of even like as I came back, because there were certain things that I realized wasn't there. So I was there, then I came back um to here, right? So as I'm leaving there and I'm coming back into this area, all these things started hitting me like, oh, okay. I have a physical body. Um, I have kids. I'm married. Oh, I got some bills that's due. Oh, I got a job, and all of these things that I just just were not a part of that.
Yeah.
I started realizing, and then another thing I would say that as I thought about like the integration of this. So the integration happens over time, and my consciousness was in a space that I hadn't experienced before, right? So in that vibration, when I came back, I was more immediately able to put and identify lower vibrational things that I had done. So, like as an
Mm,
example to that, um, and I live in a family oriented community, right? So there's a school around the corner from us. So when people speed, especially there's been people that's been speeding that has hit some of the local birds and that stuff kind of really makes me upset. So me and my son were on the way to the barber shop to get our haircut and we're driving. And this is maybe the day after my life between live session, and this person maybe passes me and we're doing 35 in a residential. This guy's maybe doing 60.
mm,
Like, and this is after school, right?
that's
So
crazy.
there's kids like and families, crossing
Yeah.
the streets, they're riding their bikes. So I'm like, I immediately go, this idiot. And soon as I said that, it took me to that's lower vibration, but that's also a learned behavior. Because when my dad was a pastor, is a pastor, so on the way to church, when people would be speeding on the way to church, my dad is like this idiot. He would just say that like this idiot is speeding, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I immediately was like, that's low vibration. And I went to my son. I was like, and I'm like, you know what? That's wrong. We should not be calling anybody idiots. And even though that brother is speeding, we want to make sure that he gets to his destination safely. And my son
Yeah.
is like, "What did you say?" And I'm like, "Man, never mind." Um,
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it irks me too because just on the same street of my daughter's school, actually right in front of her school, a child was killed there for the same reason. She got hit and she died instantly.
mm,
So they've tried to implement now a lot of things. They put speed bumps. Now there's a cross guards. They have like new speeding limits up. The community really pushed to implement a lot of things there to get people to slow down. And I feel like most of the times, even sometimes it's people that live outside the neighborhood and they kind of don't respect that there's a school right here. There are kids that are going to school and they're just speeding through to get to wherever it is that they want to go to. And yeah, things like that happen. And it was, yeah, I think it was just last year that this happened, just right in front of my daughter's school. So
Mm,
yeah, it's a serious thing and it's everywhere. But
absolutely.
to your point, there are just like, just thinking about everything that you've been sharing with me, it's such an eye opener how much of the things from previous experiences that we've had in other lifetimes, how we bring so much of that here with us too, for whatever reason. Like, for example, just something as small as your favorite color being orange and you're from an orange planet, right? Or there are aspects about our personality, or maybe the fact that you were residing primarily or working primarily in rural areas, right? And being able to see that connection between your life as a farmer in that previous life. So, how has, your regression sessions, how did they now reframe the experiences that you've had here in this incarnation?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. I would say that there is, and each session offers different things, but I would say for one, an immense level of
Yeah.
gratitude for this life, specifically because for one, and gratitude kind of like, let's say category A, and there's some subcategories, right? Bullet points under there. And
Yeah.
like gratitude, let's say for example, conflict, because conflict is not something, not that I'm afraid of, but it's not something I necessarily, I will try to avoid it. I'm not a I'm not a, I don't like problems and anything. I can deal with them, but I don't go towards problems. I don't necessarily like that energy.
I
But one of
feel
the things
you
that
on
I
that.
realized was, I realized from my life as a corn farmer, I had nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
I had absolutely nobody to talk to. And at least conflict with someone provides another person, and it provides opportunity of learning that being alone does not. So I've had an appreciation for not only communication, but if a communication leads into conflict, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not avoidance of that, like I used to, but of more of appreciative of the learning experience that is offered. So I would say a immense amount of gratitude for not only communication, but even mechanisms like this. Like to be able to have a life with, I mean, I had that my one ex girlfriend, and that was it. I didn't have anybody. So to even have mechanisms to where you're in a completely different area, and we can be having a conversation and aligning vibrations and so forth. And I would say one of the other things, that I learned that was huge for me, that all the things that we experience, and I have mentioned earlier, not only is tied to a lesson, but these lessons will continue to repeat in different ways, in order for us to learn them. That's most advantageous to us,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was something that I really appreciated. And then also the people around that are helping me learn those lessons. So even like for the relationship, that the person who was my ex in my previous life, who was my ex fiance, when I see her, I can actually be appreciative in a spiritual way that I wasn't able to before, because I now understand how, in the grand scheme, how she's really helped me be able to learn particular lessons that allows me to be able to be a wonderful husband. I believe I'm a wonderful husband to the wife that I have now. But it
Yeah.
was a part of those lessons that I learned. So it's been kind of a greater appreciation of not only how all of these parts, but love becomes the single connector. Love, and that's probably the thing that has been the most revealing, is not only is this system that we're all a part of very intelligent, but it's built upon love. So we're all vibrations of love that is learning and experiencing.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Jonathan. Tell me more. Tell me about this relationship aspect, because you spoke about coming from a life whereby you were so lonely, you had the one ex-girlfriend, and now you're in a life where you're surrounded by people. You even now appreciate conflict in a different way. And that is just so amazing, because what we tend to do, with our human brains, we have this tendency, some of us, whereby we have difficult relationships. I think most of us can think of at least one person in our lives that we've had a difficult relationship with, whoever that may be. And sometimes we tend to push people away. We push people away, keep our hearts guarded so that we don't get hurt, or so some of us even to avoid conflict, or you just can't be bothered, whatever the reason is. Whether it be intimate relationships, there are people who say they're no longer interested in pursuing intimate relationships, in dating, or any of that. Um, or maybe people who have, like, cut people out of their lives. Now, I just want to say that I am aware that, yes, there are times where that is needed, where strong, hard boundaries are necessary, whereby there are just certain people that we should not allow anywhere close to us, or there are people that we should give a limited amount of energy and attention to for various reasons. So I'm speaking in terms of like general terms, not in like extreme severe cases. Um yeah, so but there are some of us, like, okay, using myself as an example, there are times when I've had difficulties with intimate relationships, when maybe back in my 20s, where I would get really frustrated because I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And I felt like, well, I'm putting my best foot forward. I think I'm a good human being. I try my best to do the right thing and to love people and treat them well, but somehow I'm always unlucky in love with the wrong person and end up getting butthurt at the end. So that was me in my 20s. And at some point in time, I just wasn't interested in seeking new relationships and wanting to be with anyone else and wanting to pursue anything, because I was just like, what's the point? So I think that is something that we all go through at some point in time, whether with family or friends. There are people who kind of give up on even familial relationships or friendships. And as I said, we're not talking about the severe cases where we really need to cut some people off, because sometimes that is needed. But I really want you to speak to this aspect of the relationships that we have here, and how it's so easy for us to take it for granted, even the difficult ones, and how much, I guess, as you said, like everything in the broader perspective, when you kind of zoom out and look at things, everything comes from love. But when you're experiencing that as a human being, especially when you're having those difficult experiences with other people, it doesn't feel like that. It feels chaotic, it's messy, and sometimes there's a lot of hateful things that are said in the midst of all of that, or maybe a lot of things that you do that you probably might regret after. Right. So, yeah, I really want you to speak to that, because your experience is really interesting, because your experience really highlights relationships and the value of relationships and what that can do for us, even if they're difficult.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say like you're right, like in that a lot of times in the midst of it, that when you're going through something, if somebody's like pissing you off or they're being an a-hole, right? That's it's mean, it's rude, so those emotions are there, they're present, and they're valid. So no one are this is not an expression of invalidation. But when you zoom out and you say, okay, what is the kind of the lesson that is tied to that experience? And can that experience be had without that person?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. The answer is no. So those folks in regards to relationships, how I have looked at it as um, is to be able to understand that people are not only there for you, well, relationships are there for you to be able to learn, but like you mentioned, there are certain relationships that you move towards. So I can even give like some particular examples. Like there were certain relationships that I I cut off once I got married because they were some of those guys were doing things that just married guys just don't do. And that was an energy that I personally did not want to be around. So I really saw a shift from people that I did hang out with who maybe would um go out all the time. And I'm not saying anything with wrong with going out, but going out for the intention of
Mm.
meeting the opposite sex and things like that. So that was something that I said, this is more of an energetic decision, right?
Yeah.
So when I've made kind of decisions about relationships, they've been more about energetic decisions, and then who are the people that fit that energy. And so it's not like an individual. So it was just easy to be able to say, well, these individuals still cool, still talk to, but in regards to certain things, you know, that's just not it, or I'm just not going to talk to them about certain things, right? And
Yeah.
and that would just be kind of how it's more of a protector. And the other part that I would say in regards to those relationships that people you may be at sometimes feeling as though I'm that you may not want to converse with a lot of people, or you may want to feel maybe be more secluded. And I can maybe even understand that because depending on not only the essence of that person, but what previous life that they had, or previous lives that they had, to where maybe this life they just want to just maybe chill. You know what I'm saying? Or they maybe don't want all of this noise, or want a lot of folks. But I think the thing that has been the most beautiful in the way I've looked at relationships, and this is how it's mentioned in the law. It's kind of mentioned in the law of one, and they talk about that once a person becomes an adept. And I'm not calling myself an adept, but these are things that I try to do. That you can start to what they call work with what's called meta programs,
Mm.
and they give the example of that let's say I'm driving and somebody rear ends me with their car. So, as energy flows up, it goes through our different energy centers. So the first reaction is, man, what just happened? That what is they
Yeah.
doing? That red ray energy. But then as you go up to orange ray and then yellow ray, you start to then calm down to be able to say, okay, let's exchange insurance information. I'm not going to fight. This is not one of those situations. And then they talk about, but each situation is an opportunity to utilize higher chakras and energy centers,
Yeah.
right? So let's say if then after you exchange insurance information, then you move up to Yellow Ray and say, this has been a crazy day or a rough day for both of us. You want to go grab a tea or coffee or a beer, right? And then essentially that relationship then becomes continues to progress as to where a simple accident um, became like the reason or coincidence of a beautiful relationship. And that's how I approach relationship is, are there ways in which higher energy centers can be used and utilized? And if so, I try to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice way to think about it too. That is, it comes with that level of awareness of being able to actually tune into what's happening within you at the moment. And I think that's the important aspect of that. Going back to, your experiences with your regressions and the things that you were learning there, how have you been able to integrate that into your life? For example, when you're speaking about the speeding incident, right? How are you able to kind of begin to embody a lot of these things that you became aware of? Because sometimes it's easier said than done, right? It comes with
Right.
practice. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say in regards to to like the embodiment, I would think there's with that experience, there's been a knowing that there, if I'm going through a situation that may seem anxious or may seem more stressful, that experience kind of allows me to be able to say, okay, there's more in this moment than this just these emotions.
Yeah.
Um, I've had these experiences, and it allows me to be able to kind of zoom out to be able to say, okay, right now I'm in something like I'll even give like a realistic example. There was something that I have been working towards that in regards to ConsciRise that I think was going to be moving forward, and I spent a lot of time on it, and I'm getting the news that it wasn't going through
Mm.
at the time kind of as I expected. And immediately, of course, like what happened, what did you do, disappointment, all of these kind of like natural feelings and things started to come about. But then I just started to just say, okay, these emotions are as they are happening. And I think when you talk about awareness, I kind of try to look at myself as I look at myself as like a scale, and if I'm at or if you think about if you're a science person, different pH levels, right? So we know like
Yeah.
uh, so we know seven is like that. Seven is neutral, right? So I'm always trying to be at neutral, and then what are the experiences that even may make me more alkaline or more acidic or more positive or more negative, right?
Love
And
that.
then
Yeah.
as we stray away from those things, being able to being able to come back and coalesce to be able to say, okay, those experiences that took me off balance, whether positive or negative, um, how am I able to like balance that emotion out? And that was one of the huge things, even with this past weekend, when I saw, okay, this is taking me way off my balance, and you can feel that. A lot of times, you can feel yourself starting to slip, and that's that moment to say, okay, look, we got to change some stuff right now.
Yeah.
And to me, that's been that initiative. When you start feeling yourself fall, it's not moving more into that. It's being able to kind of course correct right there. And if you could just for me, it was just thinking about love. And once I started thinking about love, I went back to you're here for a bigger reason than just this moment. It went to you got shot in the head in a previous life for this moment.
Yeah.
Like and it's I was able to start to and then I made me think about, you're on a specific mission here to be of service, to be able to bring love and light to this. So by way of thinking about love in the moment, revert back. I thought about that experience, and I was able to zoom out to just be able to understand that not only is life bigger than this moment, but this moment is a part of my trajectory, and
Mm.
that's what has been, I would say, the realization of integration is that all of these moments are part of a spiritual progression and a spiritual trajectory that I'm going up on.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's huge. That is huge. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so before I forget, I also wanted to ask you when you had those previous lives, right? Did you
Mhm.
end up doing your life review to kind of figure out what the purpose was of those lifetimes and experiences that you had from them?
Yeah, so so there was immediately after the session, um, you talk with the person who initiate the session, and there's kind of like a debriefing. So there was a debriefing there where they kind of asked continuous questions. They asked more questions basically to to think about, right? So
Yeah.
that piece is there for both experiences, and it's something else that I'll mention um, that somewhat's going to answer the question, but I just think it's important because in regards to the to relationships, but also the integration piece.
Yeah.
And so immediately following, I basically had a 2.5 hour drive to Minneapolis, St. Paul, in order to receive the session. So I had 2.5 hours back, right, to think about it. But also during that time, remember, like I just had a, I'm still like crying because I was lonely. I just realized I was white. What do these things mean, right? I'm having all of these things like, what does all of this stuff mean? uh, but the biggest one that I got, and I know this was a reason, but I got the thing. I got something that says you need to call your dad,
Mm.
and um and part of it was because I knew that for one, that was an opportunity to build a bridge, because a lot of the things that I believe, my dad would just think is completely crazy,
Mm.
or not biblical. So King James, anything outside the King James version
Oh
is up the
yeah.
devil. He's not messing with it.
Yeah, I
So
feel you.
that's the context. So on the way back from there, on the way back, while I'm driving, I'm like, I gotta call my dad, because not only do you create this bridge, but if I wait a day or two, it's just not gonna be as potent, and I wouldn't say everything that I feel. So I called my dad, and he picked up, and I was just like, look, he's like, yeah, like, what's up? Because normally when we call, we talk, it's for a reason. It's not just a, hey, how you doing? It's some of that, but we don't really do a lot of that. So he like, like, yeah, what's going on? Like, what's up? And I'm like, well, look, I just had this experience that I want to be able to tell you about. And he's like, okay, what is it? And I'm like, well, and of course, I didn't say, well, I just did an experience to learn about reincarnation, because that would be automatic, no. But I
Yeah.
said, I went through a period of I did hypnosis, which, there's research behind it, and you can utilize a medical statements account, all of these different things to kind of provide some validity to it, because
Yeah.
I know he probably wouldn't be the person he wouldn't read that thing. That's just not anything he would actually read. So as I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
explaining, he's like, okay. So once I had him there, I explained the experience, and I explained kind of what happened, maybe in a little bit more detail, but I was able to get a little bit more into depth, because he knew my ex fiance. So I could talk about her. I could talk about my sister, his daughter, who I saw, or Dr. McKnight, who he knows as my mentor. So these
Hmm.
specific people, I would say, made him very, very curious. But one of the things that he asked me, he's like, you did all of this. What did you learn from all of this? What did you learn? And one of the things I said was kind of what I mentioned to you earlier, was the 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 fact of communication, and how communication with another person allows a learning that you can't have on your own. So I told him, I'm like, one thing I learned, which is even why I called, is to share this experience with you, because it's important to me, but also I know before I call that you're probably not going to agree with it.
Yeah.
But even if you disagree with it, that still allows an opportunity for us to talk and maybe learn from each other.
Beautiful.
And what my dad said, he was like, basically what he's, in long story short, what he said was, and this I appreciate it. He was like, even though you're not going the exact route that maybe would have been, I guess, a preference from a religious point, the outcomes are the same. So you have a family, you are taking care of your family, you are doing things that you think are good and are trying to help people. And since those outcomes are the same, then that's the bridge.
Mm.
And prior to that experience, that bridge did not exist. I would send my dad stuff to read, and it would be like on, let's say, African spirituality, or certain things like that I thought could be a connection. No, crickets, crickets, crickets. So this experience honestly provided me, I would say, the motivation and the potency to be able to have that phone call. But being brave in that moment have led me to be even more brave when
Yeah.
talking, and to be able to be more honest and more transparent, and utilize more of my Blu-ray energy center.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, it just goes back to what we were speaking about earlier about how relationships are such a beautiful way for us to learn about each other, and to learn about ourselves, to learn about each other, and to learn about life, and to just learn a lot of like really fundamental core things that will help us to evolve on so many different levels. Because as we develop as human beings, mentally, emotionally, we develop spiritually, our soul develops as well. So it's really key, it's really important. um because I feel like it's easy to want to isolate yourself, it's easy to want to separate ourselves, because that is what we tend to do. We create separation between any and everything here, and even between each other. And it goes back to even your experience, knowing that, recognizing that you were white in a prior life, and you're doing now, you were doing all this diversity stuff in your career in this life. I'd love to know, what are some of the things that you were able, when you have that perspective, when you can come from that perception now of being on the other side, coming back to the work that you're doing, how are you able to draw from that experience that you had to kind of implement that into how you communicate, into first, well, how you even perceive the issue? When we talk about racism and all these things, how we interact with each other as human beings, you know, how are you able to now perceive all of that, and now to integrate some of what you learned from that previous life into the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I will say like kind of, first and foremost that I realized that was I would say a realization that I always knew, but um like I grew up in Cleveland, in the area I grew up with. I had a nice life, but the area I grew up in, there were people who sold drugs. I had friends who, I mean, people I grew up with who were shot. So it was like I would say a dangerous area. People were getting hurt. So I grew up like knowing how to fight, and doing a lot of those things. And there would be at times to where I would fight to where it was. I mean, even at games, we would have knives on us because there could be like but at those, and I don't say this to try to act like I'm a tough guy, right? Because I'm a PhD living in, so I'm fine. I'm not that guy. But I always knew that if something came to the edge, that I would do it. Like
Yeah.
if something came to the edge, that I would actually like do what I need to do to protect myself.
I mean,
And
you've lived that
I,
life though.
yeah, yeah, and I realized that when I was in
You've
business,
been
was
that
like, oh
guy.
yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. I can be that guy. I can. Um, so that has been a time to be able to really check my temper and to check like even how I'm communicating with my kids. And that's
Yeah.
where I've kind of really tried to be able to say, okay, I know, and not that of course I would go to that extreme with my kids, never, but everything has a process. And maybe I may be raising my voice too much. Or all of these different things, I really tried to say with that is knowing that I have the ability to go all the way, then what is that balance to be able to then be of service to that person that's in front of me? Because I've looked at it as, and it's been hard, but even my daughter, when she's writing on these all white walls, she's the creator. And that's where I've been able to just, that's noticing that the other person is the creator. You talk to somebody completely different.
Yeah.
Opposed to what are you doing? Like it's all right, sweetie. Come on now. You know you can't. Now you better not do this. The tone is different. So that's also been a piece of it is as these things have happened, like realizing that the creator is in all of us, right? In all of these different experiences that we have. And can you ask the second part of the question?
Yeah. So I wanted to know how you were able, when you're on the other side and you can see like you're this white dude, right?
Oh yeah,
And
the race.
now
Yeah.
now you're doing all of this diversity training and the work that you're doing in that field, I'd love to know how you're able to blend the perspectives, like to balance the perception
Yeah,
as the lived experience as a Black man and what we see going on in America and the George Floyd situation. And he's not the only ones. All
of
sorts of
course.
people are being targeted nowadays, you know? Anyone
Yeah,
the right shade of brown is up for grabs. So, how are you now able to take from that prior experience as this white farmer and now balance the perspective that you have here as a man of color?
yeah. So no, thank you. I remember now. So the first thing was, um, I'm a lot more empathetic.
Mm,
I'm a lot more empathetic because one thing that I could not understand previously, is how can white people not see racism?
yeah,
How can not they not see discrimination?
yeah.
And that would be like I mean the things that would like I would be asking myself this question on a consistent basis. Well, in my past life regression, I got an answer, and the answer was they don't see it if they're not looking at it.
Mm,
And one of the things that I realized was that I don't know the exact time frame, but I do know I was in the kitchen frying some chicken. So I at least know if chicken was being fried, racism was around. So like the timelines, right?
it's gotta be the
Uh,
fried chicken.
right. so so but my whole thing was I was so lonely and so depressed. That's all I could think about.
Yeah.
I couldn't think about like fighting for anybody else's rights or because my life was in shambles. So I've become a lot more empathetic to people who may not see it that I thought they should see it. And
Mm,
that's been one of the things in regards to the race thing. The second part is I actually did a presentation. It was like I don't remember, but it was I probably should know, but it was a Minnesota organization that's focused on parks and bringing people back to natural environments. And one of the things that I proposed there was a theory of diversity and reincarnation, and that we diversity is connected to reincarnation because we reincarnate in these different races and bodies to understand particular perspectives, maybe in particular geographies at particular points of time,
yeah.
and that allows you to have a very particular perspective that you need to learn from that particular lens. Um, so the way I've kind of seen it now in regards to race and all of these different things is they're they're tools for learning, and I've become, like I said, more empathetic because it may not be that time for that person to be able to know, and that may be their particular lesson is to learn from that. And the last part I would say, and when I was in Minnesota, I worked with the indigenous people, the Osheti Shakowini, and I would have opportunities to talk to one of their elders in particular. And we were in a meeting one time, and he had asked me, you know, well, share this perspective, but one basically his perspective was um, the indigenous people. What he was saying, they look at each other as spirits and
Yeah.
souls, and spirits and souls don't have a race. So why is it important to talk about black this, indigenous this, Asian this? Why is that helpful? Because it seems more dividing and decisive, knowing that we're all of the one creator. So why do you even do that?
Yeah.
And it was a good question. But one of my response was that it becomes important when you are looking at um, particular groups or populations that are disenfranchised.
Right.
So it's different to be able to say our graduation rate is, let's say, it's at 85%. But that 85% is, let's say, 90% right, 90% white, and it's maybe 20% for blacks, maybe 30% for Asians, but it's lower for, let's say, certain groups of people, lower for LGBT. So then the question becomes, then why are certain groups having different results?
Right.
So we had a very, I would say, I'm a more data driven person. I create variables and things like that, and it's more of a spiritual thing. But um, it was it was helpful for me to be able to understand why, the reason we break these things down, and I have a thing, is because we have institutions where people graduate, and then we have a grading system. So
Mm.
it was basically me explaining the why, but we kind of built a bridge where all these things were created from was created because of systems and things, and even this land was stolen from you all. So it was really a conversation to be able to that we landed on. Like, of course, the unity and things are important, but it's also important to disaggregate the data in order to see where inequities may lie.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that is so true. That is absolutely
And then the last thing I'll say to that is, and this is, and so these are still kind of my thoughts, way more empathetic, um, having these conversations. But a lot of times people ask like, well, why focus on the the black graduation rate, or why graduate on the Hispanic Latino graduation rate,
true. Mm.
and it's when in statistics, you get to a point to where, let's say, if your target, let's say, is 85%. If you want to raise the bar to higher, let's say if you're trying to get to 80, let's trying to get to 80%. Let's say we have a group that's at 76% and
Mm.
one group that's at 20%. To get the percentage higher, do you go for the group that's at 76% or the group that's at 20%? You go for the group that's at 20%. And then what you'll
Exactly.
find is, if you figure out some of these problems, it'll impact this too, right? So I'll give another example, and this is, again,
Yeah.
this is statistics, and it's true that we found that there were there was brought to our attention that there were certain groups of people who were being sent to collections more in the Minnesota system, specifically at our institution. So there were, and it was actually the international office. So the international office came and said, Dr. Locust, we believe this is an inequity because international students, we believe, are being sent to collections to more. And I'm
Yeah.
like, perfect. Well, let's look and see. And what we found was, it was a large group, above average group of international students who were, but the highest population was being sent on collections were Black and Hispanics, and
Mm.
then Hmong people. And I don't know if you're familiar with Hmong. Hmong, they're from the Laos, Thailand area, and are Asian, but they would say, and this is in their words, they don't have the same graduation outcomes as most Asian groups, Chinese and Japanese.
Yeah.
So their graduation rates would mirror those of Blacks and Hispanics,
You're right. You're
right?
right.
So when we're looking at these particular groups and things, those are the areas that we found were having the most inequities. So once we decided, we saw why this was happening for these particular groups, and we fixed that. Not only did it help them, but it helped, like, also 40% of whites who were also being sent.
Yes. Yeah.
So those are just things that are just, and I could go through because we did a lot of these different things that not only impacted students of color and poor whites, but it also impacted great majority because they were also experiencing these too. But they were, it was at such a kind of, there were so many of them, you just couldn't detect it because the population was so large.
Yeah. You speak to like a very interesting issue there, because I think the thing that as humans we often fail to recognize is that when you help one of us, you help the whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have the tendency to try to keep one group down, or even just in our individual lives. Some of us do have that crab in a bucket mentality. Some of us have jealousy or issues seeing other people succeed and rise. And that's the problem. A lot of us really don't recognize that we need that. That's a good thing. When we see others going up, we should push them further. And if we see someone that's down, we should lift them up, because essentially it helps all of us as individuals, as groups, in the collective. When you help
Hmm.
one, you help all. It's all
100%.
connected.
And this will kind of be like kind of the last thing I'll say about this diversity piece, but it's important, and I'll mention it because I know you have a very intelligent listening base, and they would either be interested and even could look it up. When you look at and I still feel this way, even though I'm empathetic towards it, but when you look at it, the cost, right, the actual cost of racism and discrimination is to the point to where you can actually put calculations on it of, let's say, how much the George Floyd lawsuit costs, or how much of taxpayer dollars those things cost. So you can put an amount of money on it.
Oh,
But there
yeah.
was just this one researcher, I can't remember her name right now, but essentially what she looked at was essentially the impact of racism and discrimination on innovation. And the way she did that was she measured patent filings. Okay. So what she did was she measured patent filings all the way until, let's say, for example, when in the U.S. when slaves became free and blacks had access to um, patent attorneys, they had access to libraries, right? And then what she did was over the course of history, she would track to be able to see what would happen to black people filing patents during major instances of violence.
Mm.
So let's say like Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a big case or whatever that said, okay, blacks should be able to go to school with whites, right? That happened. She was able to track. There was a huge increase in violence, right? So a lot of black people got killed, and then patent violence decreased, right?
Yeah.
Because you are not creating, or cannot. It's hard to be creative if you're in a state of panic and a state of fear.
Yes.
So what she tracked was over this course of history to where patent filings pretty much went to zero by black people. They went, and these are by black people, right? They went to basically zero, and it was around 1920, and she was looking and thought it was a statistical anomaly. But what she found was it was Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was when the people came there and killed all of the folks in Tulsa, and nothing happened. And one of the things that they found was
Wow.
that the people who destroyed that town and killed those people, nothing really happened to the white folks that did it. So that became like a message to other kind of evolving towns and spaces where black entrepreneurship was growing, that it could be destroyed with no consequence. And so she estimates in her research that from that time, the United States, as well as the world, is missing out on over 1,000 patents from black people that we should have but don't have because of discrimination and racism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you think about even the success of Black people, or a lot of the discoveries of Black people that we now depend on today, that has made like life changing impact for medicine, education, right? And these fields that we rely on everyday science. When you talk about like NASA and the things that they're able to discover out there, a lot of the things that Black people have discovered really pushed, like just pushed us so far and created so much change, right? And brought us to a completely different level of what we can do, our capacity and capability as human beings. So you're absolutely right. That research makes complete sense, because when you were completely subjugating others, when they're in this spiral of fight and flight, fight or flight, the stress, the anxiety, the fear, they're not able to tap into that creativity. They're not able to develop solutions to a lot of the things here that we face on the ground. They're not able to expand their mind to be able to think outside the box and think of other things that can not only help us as individuals, but actually help the whole. And it's so important when we can nurture each other, we can truly begin to see how, when that unfolds, we can truly begin to see how that helps us all as a society on a macro level to expand, not only in a conscious way, but even on the ground, in a physical way, in the things that we can do, in the things that we can begin to implement into our society, and the change that we can create for ourselves, for all of us. So what you're saying makes absolute sense.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that. And it just speaks to like all of this conversation. It speaks to, when you're talking about your past life regression and coming back to your purpose and all of that, everything that you're sharing with me here, I feel like this is like a whole full circle thing for you, because I feel like everything that you're doing and your research and what you're speaking about is in full alignment with everything that you've been learning from those lives up until this moment. So that's so beautiful to see that. I'd love for you to actually tell me more about ConsciRise before we head out, because I feel like you're doing some important work with that. And I'd love to know how that came into development for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So ConsciRise, it stands for consciousness rising, and I'll even see for as you all look it up, you'll see like there's basically two circles coming together, and from the bottom, the rainbow's going up. And what that signifies on a spiritual level is that two beings coming together, and by way of the interactions, being able to utilize all of the different energy centers, and that has impact through all of the different octaves. That's why they're 8 circles. So we focus on practitioners, trusted and vetted practitioners. So all of our practitioners on the platform, we have a 5-step vetting process, which means they've been had background checks. We verified all of their certificates and certifications by way of experiences. So we do a monthly community fasting experience for 3 days. As I mentioned, fasting is something that is important to me. And
Yeah.
then as well as kind of a program. So right now we're doing like a mind, body, spirit consciousness 101, where we have 7 of our practitioners just talk about certain things like making time for inner work. What is intuition? How do you develop it? All of these different things. And it started when I mentioned I was going through my health issue and I was looking at things outside of traditional medicine. I came across, like, honestly, people that just tried to take advantage of me and people that just tried to scam me. And I naively went in kind of thinking that everybody who's doing this work is trustworthy and they're honest. And there were kind of things put in place to protect the consumer, like they, which is done, here in Canada, whether it's higher education, there's the Higher Learning Commission and so forth. So we were kind of created because we wanted to make sure that as people are looking for practitioners at any stage of their life, that not only do they have a community that they can join for free, no one's going to ask them for anything, but if they get to the point to where they want a practitioner, they know that the practitioner that they're dealing with has been interviewed multiple times, that know everything has been verified, and that is that is real. So that's the work that we're doing with ConsciRise. And our goal is not to have the most practitioners, but to have what we consider are the best practitioners. And we have
Mm.
practitioners that offer intuitive coaching to hypnosis, past life regression, and from Vedic medicine, astrological readings, and then we're even, which I'm kind of getting excited about, animal communication. And we're going to be creating a training
Nice.
program for intuitives who want to be able to communicate with pets, as we see this as an area that's going to be growing, and we want to be a leader in that space. So that's ConsciRise, and again, we offer experiences that are free, where you can be able to come on and just learn and enjoy and grow with us. And for folks who may want a more structured path, we also have different memberships as well.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. That is amazing. And I think it helps with the credibility piece, right? Because I know a lot of people who are maybe they question this work, or because maybe they have a different upbringing, different set of beliefs, and they might look at this and say, well, it's fake, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. Things like this definitely helps. So I love what you're doing with that. That is amazing. Um, I just wanted you to speak to anything that comes up for you just from your heart, from everything that you've gleaned from your experiences, your regressions, and just your life experience here in this incarnation as well. When you look at how things are playing out right now in the world, it looks a little bit crazy. And I'd love for you to just kind of speak to that a bit as to where we are and how where your consciousness is situated in regards to what we see on the outside and
Mhm.
with everything that's happening right now.
Yeah. So I would say like where I'm situated right now is, and I'm a person that I do follow politics. I do know what's going on. I believe, and I don't want to get too political, but there are certain things that I just don't agree with that the United States is doing in regards to taking over foreign governments or being influenced by one. There's just certain things that you can look at it and it looks kind of grim. I will say there's a few things that make me feel positive. First one is, and I'm not an expert on this, so I don't claim to be, but for those who are familiar with the Mayan calendar, there are certain things that do say from that perspective that this is a year where there's major consciousness that is happening. I would say secondly to that, as I think about my personal experiences
Yeah.
and the times where I really really saw growth is when I hit rock bottom, and when what I see is right now is
It's always the rock
not
bottom.
on. Oh, it's a rock bottom, and I think in the U.S. and I don't want to talk about other cultures, but in the U.S. there are people here that have been drinking the Kool-Aid, as an expression here is the Kool-Aid, and I
Yeah.
realized, oh, we've hit rock bottom, and I think that once you did that, there's an awareness. So even though again I believe things that are glim that we're all feeling, it's leading to fields of awareness that I think people are accessing. Not only that it's happening spiritually and metaphysically and things like that are already happening, because I believe the earth is already vibrating in fourth density. However, the people here are not necessarily there. So I believe that these things that are happening, these vibrations of anger, war, and all of these different things are pushing people closer and closer to spirituality, to want to seek understanding. And I would say even when you look at it from, I know I'm talking more metaphysical and things like that, before are people who will say, well, you're a researcher, let's talk about the research. Well, let's talk about it. Because even if you look at Pew Research actually tracks religion versus spirituality. And what we find is not only in the U.S., but even especially in the U.S. As spirit, it's going like this. Spirituality is increasing as religion is decreasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people are opening up to not only more spiritual perspective, but when you think about where that has been situated in, and a lot of that has been situated in is people's health, right? COVID, people now
Yeah.
who are experiencing things because of those COVID shots, and people looking at more at integrative health physicians. When you start looking more at integrative health and you start looking more at how can I eat better and what's of the body, that's a pathway of consciousness, right? So I think there's
Mm.
things that are happening that are leading people on pathways of consciousness that may not necessarily be calculated as we see what's on the news.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's a whole lot of conversation. Jonathan, thank you so much. This was so fun. This was so fun. I love your energy. I love the insights that you brought to this conversation. Um, we need to catch up and do this again. This was just
We
so
will.
amazing. Please tell us where we can reach you and get in contact with you, or anything relating to health, spirituality, ConsciRise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you can, if you look me up as Dr. Jonathan Locust Jr., you can follow me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at JLOCUSTJR, J Locust Jr. You can follow us ConsciRise, ConsciRise, and go to our website, join one of our communities, engage, and reach out to me because I love talking about this stuff. So if you reach out, those know who do. I do respond because I had I had a as I shared a life previous to this where I didn't have any friends. I ain't have nobody. So in this life, I'm trying to get as many as I as many as I can.
Yeah.
So please please feel free to reach out. And then even to you, I want to say thank you to you for not only creating this space but creating this platform because there are when we look at pathways to consciousness, right? You're certainly a conduit for higher vibrational energy, quantum energy, and all of these different types of high vibrational energy. Intelligent infinity also comes to mind. So I appreciate you for being a conduit for where spirituality and high vibrations can actually be able to enter.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I value and
Absolutely.
appreciate that so much coming from you, Jonathan. Thank you. You as well. You're doing such amazing work. It's just so amazing just to see your journey come full circle and just continue doing what you're doing. You're doing amazing things, putting a lot of love into this world.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for having me. I'm so appreciative. And can't wait to figure out what we can do next because this was great.
Right? Oh, I'm so ready. I'm so ready.